Hello. Welcome to the SMU Video Archive Series. In this series, we interview members of the SMU community who can provide insight into the history of SMU, especially from the perspective of their time at the university. I'm Travis Jordan, and today we have with us Jo Fay Godbey, who is the former director of the University Lecture Series. And Jo Fay, I understand that you have a long career at SMU, beginning as a student, and then for over 30 years served in a capacity in a variety of ways at the university. Tell us how you first got, after you graduated and were a homemaker, how you got involved back into the life of SMU.
Well, they called and asked me to be on the board, on the Alumni Board, which I did for several years. And that gave me an opportunity to see what was going on and become connected to the university again. Pierce Allman was the director at that time, and so it was fun to work with him. He was very creative, and he asked me to be in charge of the Friday program for the women, in which I said that I would do, and he wanted to know, what kind of style show I wanted to have. And I said I didn't want to have a style show this year. I wanted to do something that was educational or informative about the university. And so he and Elizabeth Peabody and I brainstormed about what it could be. And I said I wanted it to be something significant academically. So we started a program to recognize the achievement of women and had a luncheon where the local women, or any woman who graduated from SMU, was recognized for her outstanding accomplishments. And it worked very well, and it went along for several years that way until they integrated it into the Distinguished Alumni Awards. So now all of those women who were taken in through the women's luncheon were automatically put in as distinguished alumni recipients, which I thought was progress for women.
Good, yes.
Because previously all of the awardees, I guess nearly all of the awardees beforehand had been men. And so the women stepped onto the scene, which was only right.
So your presence on the Alumni Board helped move things along in that direction then?
Well, I hope so, and I really enjoyed that. But the way I came to SMU was through Dr. Sidney Reagan, who was in charge of, well, he was in the business school and was appointed as a director of a new Center for Urban Studies. And so he asked me, he called me one day and asked me if I'd like to have lunch, and asked me if I would work part-time at SMU, and it was like offering candy to a baby. I couldn't have thought of any place I'd better like to work than SMU.
Well, what year approximately did you begin this work with the center?
I came in 1969.
69.
Uh-huh.
And did you immediately then begin to develop this program? Was it a grant?
Yes, it was a federal grant. They had all kinds of grants for urban studies. This is when Lyndon Johnson was president. And so SMU took advantage of that. And that was a great help to put this program into effect. And of course, when the funds ran out, they closed the office, but it ran for 10 years.
Was it a program to study the Dallas area or the urban environment specifically in the Dallas area, or was it a general thing?
It was general. We had I was just looking at some of the programs that we had, and we had programs on religion, we had programs on race, we had programs on city planning. I worked a lot with the city officials. We put on a planning, teaching, or school for city employees, and discuss the principles behind it.
This involved faculty from SMU as well, did it not? Other faculty?
Yes, yes. You know, because they took advantage of what we had to offer in expertise and put it together with what they had to offer.
If I recall, also, one of the proposals that came out of that study had to do with what, at least I call today, the Town Lake Program, and developing the Trinity River into a lake area, which has come back in recent years, but that may have been the very first time that idea came up. I'm not sure. Do you know?
I think it was. What happened was that the architects came to our office and said that they would like for us to co-sponsor an application for funds to do a study on the city problems and architecture or whatever, and we decided to apply that to studying about the planning for the future of the Trinity River. And as you know, of course, it crosses our city and actually divides it in two pieces, the Oak Cliff side and the Dallas side. And water quality was so poor they couldn't do anything at that time. And fortunately, they have cleaned up a lot of the river now, and they may be able to do something that will be attractive and beautiful for the city.
I think you said it started out as the Center for Urban Studies and then included environmental studies, because that became, even then, an issue of significant importance, both politically and I think socially, civically.
Right.
Did some significant things occur because of the study, or did the program end before this could happen?
I don't. You mean before the town lake could be built,
right,
or what?
or any of the findings that came out of the urban studies?
Well, I think that what you always hope for is that you have to look at a question and examine it carefully and understand both sides. I mean, there usually are two sides to a question. And in that examination, of course, I think the most important thing that was brought out was the horrible quality of the water in the Trinity. I mean, if you built a lake out of it, it would have been
unusable.
A cesspool.
Yeah.
So, but I think that that's why we had so many conferences, because it's to make people think and to discuss the issues.
That program lasted for several years, and then how did it come to an end?
Well, they ran out of funding. You know, the government was very liberal with their grants and trying to help with urban problems. And later on, when Nixon came in, he turned more to environmental problems instead of the city and human problems. And so in order to get grants to do the studies, we put the environmental component into what we were doing, which of course is very important when you're talking about cities. You've got to have a good environment. Yeah. Pollution is a problem. And so I think that you have to be on your toes to think, to see what are the leading issues that people need to face. And that's what we tried to do.
When that program ended then, and you were faced with what to do as your next phase in life, I think another door was open. It seems like that's always what happens when one door closes, another door is
Well,
open.
see, we were sponsored by Dedman College. It wasn't called that then. It was called the School of Humanities and Sciences. But Dr. Brooks was the dean at that time. And so when the money ran out, we had to make a decision. I mean, I was still working for SMU, but I didn't have anything to do. And so he suggested that I might go over and work in continuing education, or that I might go into fundraising. And I explored those things, and they really didn't have any openings in those departments, and unless I wanted to travel. And since I had 3 children at that time, I didn't want to travel, and also a husband. But as I as I was waiting to find out what I was going to do, we changed deans, and so Dean Early became the dean after Dr. Brooks, and so I got to thinking about if it wouldn't be a good idea for us to have some kind of a lecture series that we could do using SMU professors. I mean, we have the Tate Lecture Series, of course, which brings very important people to our campus from all over the world, really. But I thought that we needed to promote the quality of education that we have at SMU and what our students get. And it seemed to me that if we had some kind of lecture series for daytime, because we had continuing education at
and
night.
featuring SMU faculty.
And featuring SMU faculty, that we could do something toward promoting academic expertise and familiarizing the community with the quality of teaching that we have at SMU, which I think is superior. And I worked up an idea and a proposal and presented it to the dean, and he approved it. And so then we had to I got a committee together of people whom I knew, who were mostly involved with SMU or outside in the community, to brainstorm about what kind of programs we could have and how we could get people to come, because we knew, I met with some of the professors, and we knew we had to charge for the series because we couldn't produce it for nothing. And it was such a novel idea in Dallas, because we have book clubs and we have churches, and I mean, people were mainly used to going to lectures that were free. Mm-hmm. And so since I met with the professors and asked them if they thought it was necessary for us to pay them. And they said, well, if I wanted them to do a good job.
Yes.
Because
professors are used to being paid.
Well, it's that they had to prepare for these
Sure.
lectures. They couldn't use their college course number X because these were mature people who would be coming. And so I certainly had empathy with the idea of paying them, but it meant we had to charge quite a bit for the lectures. And then I wanted to have lunch with it so that we'd have time to let the people get acquainted with each other. I think that's one of the hard things when you're doing something new, is that if you just have disparate people coming and they don't know each other, part of the draw for most things like that is a community within the group who comes. So we were able, by having lunch and then questions afterward, to establish rapport in the group.
Did you find that many people then were repeat? They would come to several of the lectures and get to know each other that way?
Well, I just went to a lecture yesterday, and I saw some of the people that we began with.
So they have stayed.
They've stayed
a lot
with
of them
it
have
the
stayed
whole
with
time. And of course, then we developed tours also, which John Mears was the first person who came to me. He was helpful when I was developing the lecture series and spoke for me. And he said, I'd like to take a group to Austria, and would you sponsor it? So I said, well, I don't know anything about the tour business, but I'm willing to try. And so he and I worked on it and met with someone to direct the tour, and we became, it was really hard because it was a new concept, and we didn't have a lot of funds to advertise or anything like that. But we finally got about 20 people to sign up. No, I guess it was 30, really. And we also took Alessandro Camini and Eleanor Tufts, because John said he knew the history, but he didn't know the art
culture
history And so when we had those 3 good professors going, people signed up, and we took over 30 people. So it was a great success.
Have you had then since then other tours as well as just the lectures? Or?
Oh, you know, I've done everything from tour downtown Dallas.
Okay, so that became a part of it. So the format was actually to have lunch and then to have a lecture or a presentation by a faculty. And did they then just interact with the faculty person?
Yeah, they questions and
so they got to know
answer session.
I know from our personal association that academic integrity and excellence at SMU has been a lifelong love of yours. And so do you feel that this helped to accomplish and establish that perception and that reality in the Dallas community that SMU was a place of academic integrity and faculty was
well, it's
competent?
been very interesting because just now we've had 2 or 3 professors interviewed on KERA at noontime who are giving lectures for the Godbey Lecture Series, and I mean, I had phone calls saying, "Oh, hey, you know, they're going to have this professor on. Listen," because I didn't know it was going to happen. And to go back to my feeling about academic excellence, the thing that had bothered me since I was a student here was that SMU had the reputation of being a party school, and with rich kids and cars and everything that goes with that. And I just didn't think that was justified. I thought if they knew the quality of teaching that goes on at SMU, they wouldn't talk about it like that. And so, and I think we come from a culture where, if I may say so, football and sports and things like that get a lot more advertising than academic.
Right. It's easy to do that. So you were advertising the academic integrity of the institution?
That's what I was trying to do, and because I just think it's really important to get that across to the public.
Do you have any idea, Jo Fay, how many people might have crossed through those doors in 15 years? In an average year, how many people did you have participating in a lecture series?
75.
Okay.
And of course, you were asking about the effects. We've had several large gifts given to the university by people who've been attending these lectures.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just marvelous that we have developed that following.
So they got to feel like they had some ownership at SMU. A certain pride themselves, probably, although many of them were university graduates, I suspect. At least they got to
No, the
see
majority,
SMU.
I'd say the majority of them were not SMU graduates.
But of some university, perhaps.
Oh,
so
sure.
They were educated people.
They were educated people.
Right.
And they got a personal connection with those professors. You know, it wasn't just, I mean, some of them would invite them out to dinner, or they'd be on the Dedman College, appointed to the Dedman College board, and I think it's just created a real interest. You know, Dedman College and this humanities and sciences does not have the sorry to say sparkle or sexy attraction that, say, the School of the Arts has. Or the professional connection that the business school and the law school have. So a lot of our graduates are, I mean, they may be businessmen or they may be teachers. I suspect we have a lot of teachers from the education department, which is with the School of Humanities and Sciences. But those people, as I said, do not have the professional connection. Right. And so I felt that we needed to stress that part of the university.
Listening to you talk makes me realize that what you were doing, I think, filled a void that was left when the old Dallas College went away. You know, SMU used to have a presence downtown, in which they would teach in the evenings particularly, and people from the community had a way to associate and relate to SMU, but if I recall, that went away in the early 70s, or the mid-70s.
Yes,
so,
it did.
So there wasn't much presence in the community for SMU people to, other than the informal courses and the continuing education. But
Right.
that was a bit different. It didn't feature the academic
But
rigor.
I'd just like to throw in an example here of that Luis Martin taught in the continuing education for years and years. And of course, he was a very popular professor. And the Edmund Kahns took his courses, and they endowed his chair
In history, yes.
in history. So you can see how it pays to reach out to people, because even though people did not go to SMU, they still especially ought to support it when they're in this city.
Well, when they saw quality, they wanted to be a part of that.
That's
so
right.
I think that's what was there. Where were these lectures normally held?
We held them in the Alumni Center. It was just perfect. And because it held 75 people very comfortably, and then we'd have lunch in the lunchroom. So we were very disappointed when they closed that building.
Yeah, that was. And about how many lectures a year did you hold as a part of the series? Would that vary, or?
Well, we usually had a series of, say, 4 lectures, or a series of 6, and it might be done by 1 professor, or it might be done by
Several.
4 professors. And I remember we did one, a very ambitious one, that was Jim Early's idea on the history of civilization. And so we had 6 different professors speak, and that was our opening series. And I must say that it was so good that we grew, immediately started to grow. It was not a fast thing, but we had, after we'd been operating for a while, I thought we need a membership. When we started it out, I didn't want people to have to pay a membership. And I didn't think they would. So we had to earn our way first, and then we started a membership. And when I quit, we had 500 members.
Wow.
So it did grow.
Did you ever have to turn people away from a subscription?
Yes, we have had to turn people away.
So it was fairly popular.
The professors who speak often build up a reputation, if they're really scintillating or really good speakers and know their subjects well, they become popular.
Do you recall any particular series or professors? You've mentioned Luis Martin, the Dowd Chair, and others, but that stand out in the 15 years that you were there, that seemed to really resonate with the people, or were particularly appropriate to the time, perhaps, or something of that kind?
Jim Hopkins was one of the first people who was active, and he took a group to England one time. It was a second trip that we took, and he just has a big following in the lecture series.
Yeah, he's a popular professor.
And of course, Hal Williams has spoken to us a number of times, and he's well liked. And we seem to have a number of people in the history department that were. History is just an interesting subject to people. And then we had some people in the English department. We had Marsh Terry, and we just recently had Tom Arp. And then of course I would reach across sometimes, like Carol Hughes Reynolds is in the art school, but she used to come and lecture about culture and music, especially, is her specialty. And so as you worked through the campus, it was there was just lots of talent here.
Well, you've been both a student at SMU and working with the faculty and the administration much of your adult life. What would you see as some of the changes that have taken place at SMU over that period of time?
Well, of course, the student body has grown a lot.
It is bigger.
It's much bigger than it was when I went to school here. And of course, the type of students who go here are different because we have many students that are on scholarships now. And it's changed the complexion of the school. And I mean, we have the Hunt Scholars, which I think has upgraded the university. And then we've had the big Bob Dedman gift to Dedman College, which the school was named for him appropriately afterward because $25 million is a lot of money. Mm. And I just wish there were more Bob Dedmans who would give to the academic side of the university because that's always been my ambition for SMU, is that it will be noted for its high academic quality. Mm-hmm. And as you probably knew my father, Hastings Harrison.
Yes, yes.
And he was a fundraiser for SMU and was an assistant to, his title was assistant consultant to the president, Willis Tate. And he actually raised the money to endow the funds to keep this building that we're in right now, which is McFarland, to keep it in good condition all the time. You know, it's people often give money for buildings and then they fall apart.
Then they don't keep them up.
Right.
Yes.
But this building is endowed for a long time. And of course, he taught me a lot of what I know my father did because he was a very outgoing person. And he also was a fundraiser. And that combination, I mean, he didn't intend to be a fundraiser, but in his work with the YMCA and the National Conference of Christians and Jews, as well as SMU, he did become a fundraiser. And he had many, many friends who gave just because they liked him. And even people from Beaumont and people from Tulsa, whom he had worked with in his career, gave money to SMU because he was a good salesman, I guess, or because he really impressed them with SMU's future. And he was the first one to talk with Al Meadows about the gift for this building. And of course, as you know, he gave a large gift, and the building was named for him.
The Meadows School of the Arts.
Uh-huh. And I remember he told Willis, when Willis said he wanted him to come and be a fundraiser after he retired, he said, and he wanted him to raise money to build a school of the arts. He said, "I don't know anything about the arts." He was a Waxahachie boy.
But I had the privilege of knowing your father and visiting with him on a number of occasions, and the love he had for SMU was quite evident, and I see how he passed that on to you as well. But that probably enabled him to make the kind of contacts and to sell the university to the people. And we lived in a somewhat simpler time then too, I think, than we do now. And you know, people resonated to personalities and to people and that kind of thing.
I think they still do. You know, that's why it's so important, for instance, who your president is.
Yes. That's a question I'd like to ask you. You've been at SMU, as I have, through a number of presidents, and this is, I hope you don't mind my asking this question, but I think we owe it to posterity. Who do you think was probably the best president of SMU that you have known, and why?
Well, of course, I knew Willis Tate best because he was here when I came here. And I think to know Willis Tate was to love Willis Tate. And he got so many buildings built while he was here. And so I think I'd have to say that he was my favorite. But other presidents have made contributions that were important to the university. And of course, as you know, there was a period of hard times at SMU, and that's when they brought President Pai in. And as I understand it, of course, I've never been a part of that, but as I understand it, he did a lot to bring back economic stability to the university. It was hard on me, I remember, because they switched my office out of Dallas Hall over to a very inappropriate, or at least a bad setting, because they put three of us who were in, somebody from business school, and they put all the offices together, and it was a mess.
It's an open room?
Yes, with three, with secretaries and no computers and this, that, and the other. So it's a wonder we survived.
But he did stress fiscal responsibility. I remember that. Quite different from Willis Tate, but both of them were people, I think, who were well loved by the community, and that's true.
Well, I don't think that he was here long enough to be. Unfortunately, he died.
True.
In office, so I don't think that he ever had the outreach that Willis Tate had.
From the law.
And as you said, times were different too.
Right.
We had a lot of corporations move in, and it's gotten to be sort of the day of Dallas is a huge city.
You mentioned Bob Dedman as being one of the supporters of the university who was not on the faculty. Are there other people that you recall who have made significant contributions through the years that stand out? Or
well,
of course, you were mainly being with Dedman College. That would be the one you would recall.
Right. Well, there've been a lot of significant gifts to SMU, but I mean Cox for the business school, and Meadows, of course, for the School of the Arts. So then the people, Perkins. So we've had many different families who've gotten involved that have, thank goodness for SMU, have helped it grow.
We started on the interview talking about the fact that as a woman, you saw that women were not, as I interpret it, probably being given the credit and the attention that was due. Do you think that has changed over the years? Are there any particular instances that you can recall of some things that happened where women are treated differently on our campus today than they were 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Yes, I think that the one place that I first started in my, I don't want to say crusade, because I have never considered myself to be a crusader, but I am very conscious of women being overlooked. And when I worked with Pierce Almond on the Friday celebration for the football reunion, he said something about having a luncheon, a style show like we'd always done. I said, no, I want to do something different. Did we discuss that a while ago?
No.
And so by the time we...
So with women, it was a style show, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was Friday in the afternoon, and they didn't have anything to do, so they had a luncheon and a style show. And I said, no, I want to do something that expresses the academic side of SMU. And so Elizabeth Peabody and Pierce and I brainstormed and came up with the idea of giving recognition to women achievers. And so that became a tradition where they would honor 3 or 4 women every year. And I don't know how long that went on, but I think for about 10 years. And then somebody had the bright idea of integrating those women into the Distinguished Alumni Association. So it was retroactive, and the people who had been selected as outstanding women were then...
But that still continues, doesn't it?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
they still, well, they have the, but if you'll notice now when they have the dinners honoring the outstanding people, they distinguished alums, they usually have a woman, like George Bush's wife was honored last year, and before they had all been men until we finally got some of these women recognized. And now, of course, there are lots of women who have outstanding accomplishments and have been recognized, and so they're on that list. One of the other things that, as you were saying, I've always been wanting to push the idea of academic excellence at SMU, and one of the things that occurred to me was I went to a Wellesley Book and Author Luncheon, and they bring in outstanding speakers from all over the world, especially from the United States, who've written novels or outstanding books, and sold them at the luncheon. And so when I went to that, I thought, why can't SMU do that? You know, why can't we have something to honor the people who've written books at SMU? And so I brought the idea to my board, and they discussed it, and they thought it was a great idea. And so we've been doing that now, I guess, for 15 years, maybe more.
It's the Author Awards?
It's called the Distinguished Authors Luncheon for SMU, and these are, they take all the books that are written during the year, the previous year.
By the SMU?
By SMU
community.
professors from all the different schools, and they have a committee, and they decide which ones are outstanding. And of course it's very hard because you're dealing with chemistry and engineering and lawyers and everything else, so that it's not easy to make the selection, but it's come to be quite an honor. And I have noticed when I've gone to see professors that if they got the honor, that's hanging on their wall, and it's on their resumes. So here again, I mean, that gives another opportunity for us to give an incentive to professors.
As we talk, what I'm made aware of, Jo Fay, is that your career exemplifies how someone who really is interested in SMU, who really loves the school, and in your case was also fortunate to have attended the school, can come in and on their own initiative. Sounds like you really created a lot of these things yourself without being say, would you create an author's thing? Would you create a university lecture series? Would you, ways that you had a vision that needed that you wanted to push the academic integrity of the university, that you wanted to showcase some things, and made it happen. At the same time, you were a homemaker. You had a son, I understand, that has a scholarship named for him.
Yes. Yeah. We lost a son when he was 16 with cancer, and of course we tried to think about what we could do for his memory, and my dad was the one who said, well, why don't we start a scholarship at SMU? And so when he died, we suggested that people give to that.
So you were practicing what you've been pushing here, weren't you?
Yeah, we let Joe make his contribution to SMU, even though he didn't go here.
Didn't go. And you also mentioned the Godbey Lecture Series, which I failed to mention early on. After 15 years of pushing the University Lecture Series, when you got ready to retire, they named that series after you, and so it's now called the Godbey Lecture Series. I owe that
to Jimmy Jones, my dean, which when I went in and told him, I said, I think it's time that I retire. And my dad always told me, one time I was president of the League of Women Voters of Dallas, and they asked me to do it again. And so I talked it over with my dad, which I often did, things like that, and he said, quit while you're ahead.
Yes, I know that one.
and so I didn't take a second term. And that's sort of the way I felt about retirement. I actually felt like I could have worked for another 5 years, but I thought, I better quit while I'm ahead. And I made so many friends through that experience and of course met so many university professors and felt like that I had done something for the university.
Jo Fay, it's been refreshing just to visit again with you. Our careers are somewhat similar, and we came here at SMU about the same times and knew each other. But to review these things, it really is refreshing to see that someone who takes on a role in the university for the love of what they do and for the love of the university and makes it work the way that you have. I'm grateful for your presence at SMU and for your career. And
well, I guess I've always been interested in the underdog, and I got some of that from my dad too. But when I came to SMU, I lived at home, and it was very hard for me to get acquainted. And I didn't pledge a sorority the first year I was here, and so I knew what it was to be an independent, or what do they call them, a city person instead of a dorm person. And I wish I could have had that experience, but I didn't. But it certainly made me, when I was president of the Student Y here, it made it, I seized the opportunity to reach out to the kids who were town kids, that's what they called it, and to have an we did the first orientation for SMU that was ever done by having punch in Dallas Hall and name tags for them and that sort of thing. So,
well, thank you for your time here today, and I hope that our viewers have a better appreciation of some of the things that can happen by entrepreneurs such as yours.
Thank you.